Hey, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my photography talks. Hey, if you know anybody who could use a photographer in Colorado, send them my way. I also work in Los Angeles because my partner, she's out there, and I go between the two. But if anybody has any leads, we're always looking for leads. That's always a good thing. This is the work of a professional photographer. If you wonder what it's like to be a professional photographer, it's a lot of pitching. It's a lot of connecting. It's a constant searching for that next freelance gig. All right, now today I want to talk about a book. So here's a freelancer who makes a pretty good product. So I was down in Denver and I was walking down the 16th Street Mall and there was a sign for a bookstore inside the public library. And I went inside and this was there. It's Gregory Heisler's 50 Portraits. So highly recommended. And first of all, you can find books in places that aren't expensive bookstores. This was in the public library. They had a pretty good photography selection and some how-to books, some monographs, and this book was $10. And I've wanted this book, but I didn't want to pay, I think it's like $30 or $40 online, and I didn't want to pay that much. So I've been waiting, and I stumbled on it as I'm walking down the 16th Street Mall. I was actually going to a museum exhibit at the Denver Art Museum, and this was on the way. And what a treat this is. So he's a portrait photographer who's photographed many celebrities, and he's taught, and he's also, in this book, he describes each of these 50 photographs and the situation behind them, and how much time he had to do them, and the difficulties, and the lighting, and the idea of where it came from. He talks a lot about finding out what your subject will do, and he's known for working quickly. Like, people who work with him don't have a lot of time. So they may give him 15 minutes, and he's known to be able to get that done in 15 minutes. And he's often asked to create two photographs, one for the cover and one for the lead of the story inside when you get to the page that the story starts on. And he talks about how he creates both of those. And how, certainly the cover needs to be vertical, but he's a good, this is a lesson in photography right here. This is 50 lessons in what it takes to photograph Danny DeVito and looking for something to pose him on. So he ended up going to a furniture store and renting or buying a child-sized chair to put Danny DeVito on. And little stories like that. Or this photograph, this gentleman had a sore on his mouth and he didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to be photographed that day. And so he kept doing that. And so Gregory said, that's okay, we'll just use that. And so he ended up using a photograph that really featured his hands. I think that he was a famous masseuse for maybe Muhammad Ali, if I remember reading it right. And that's the kind of story. It's like those hands are probably pretty important to that shot. And it also helped the guy feel better because he was covering the sore on his mouth. So this is a book that I would highly, highly recommend. And it's a great treat. But also to go find those little bookstores. I was in a town for a photographer meetup in just north of where I live. And on my way back, there's a used bookstore I know. It's a real little hole in the wall. And I thought, I probably shouldn't stop, but okay, I will. And I make the U-turn, I go to it, and I get in there, and they have a copy of Robert Frank's The Americans, but it's $50. And I already have a copy of it. But if it were less, if it were 10, I probably would buy it for somebody else. But they had a copy of William Eggleston's Guide for $7. So I bought that for a friend who's a big Eggleston fan. And to be able to find that for $7, you just don't find those. And you have to go dig inside those little places. Even like antique stores in my area and antique marts, some dealers work in books and they have a whole bookstore inside. And you can often find these kinds of books. And it's a treat to be able to find something for not too much money and something that you can get inspired by. And that's what books do for me. I'm a big fan of portrait work, so seeing the work that he does. Let's see if I find one portrait that's big. There's a Danny DeVito in the chair. He's sitting sideways in it, and he has, in the next page, he has his contact sheet of the different poses that he did to get to that. And that's the kind of thing. It's like, there's the different poses he used, if you can see that. And this book is really fun because it's got so much information in it and a little story about each shoot. And that's what makes it, I think, for me, really inspiring. And everything you shoot has that story, and everything I shoot has that story. And we often don't think about, well, putting it down into a book and creating that. But everything we do, we have a story, whether it's photographing your family or photographing a partner. You have a story of how you went about getting that. Sometimes it's a little bit of direction, sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's adding light, sometimes it's not. But photographs and their stories, you get to read a lot of them in this book, and I highly recommend it. Gregory Heisler, 50 Portraits, found at a public library bookstore, $10, great deal. All right, that's today's photography talk. You find any good bargains in your area? Go looking. If you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. If you can support, hit the Patreon. Thanks to my Patreon supporters, and I will see you next week with another photography talk. Here's the good light.